Good evening, folks. This is the ASMR Nerd, and today I'll be continuing with a soft-spoken reading of Martin the Warrior, a book from the Redwall series. If you're joining us for the first time, I highly recommend that you go listen to the first video, which is the prologue of the book, before listening to this one, which will be Chapter 1. I'm trying something a little bit different this time as well, in that I will be doing just audio, not video recording. This is for a couple of reasons. One is that it's easier for me to record. I don't have to worry about what I'm doing with the book or my hands. And two, I think, or I hope it will keep the file size down on the video to make the uploads a little bit quicker. And three, it'll help you focus on the story and on my speech, as opposed to trying to perhaps be distracted or tempted to read the text for yourself as we go along. Now, I'm curious to know which of these two methods you prefer. The first video, where I include the footage, the video of the book and the page turning in my hands, or what I'm doing here, where it'll be just my voice and a couple of pictures of the book and the chapter heading and such, accompanied by the audio. So please do let me know. Anyhow, here we are. Martin the Warrior. Book 1. The Prisoner and the Tyrant. He was only a young mouse, but of strong build, with a glint in his eye that proclaimed him a born fighter. A creature of few words who never chatted needlessly. The early summer sun of the eastern coast beat down pitilessly on his unprotected head as he carried and stacked chunks of rock beside the masons who would shape it into blocks that would enlarge Fort Marshank. A weasel captain named Hisk swaggered up, cracking his long whip threateningly, looking for an excuse to cut loose on his slaves, who toiled in the dusty heat around him. His eye settled on the young mouse. "You there, liven yourself up. Come on, stir your stumps. Lord Badrang will be round for an inspection soon. Get moving, or you'll taste my whip." The mouse dropped the rock he was carrying and stood staring levelly at the bullying weasel. Hisk cracked the lash viciously, the tip flicking the air a fraction from the victim's face. The young mouse did not move, his eyes hooded over as he stood in silent defiance. The weasel captain drew the lash back to strike, but the bold, angry eyes of the young slave seemed to challenge him. Like all bullies, the weasel was a coward at heart. Averting his gaze from the piercing stare, Hisk snapped his whip in the direction of some more timid creatures. "Come on, you worthless idlers. No work, no food. Move your carcasses. Here comes Lord Badrang." Flanked by his aides, Gurrid the rat and Skullrag the fox, Badrang the tyrant strode imperiously onto the site. He waited whilst two hedgehogs hurriedly built him a makeshift seat from stone blocks. Skullrag swiftly covered it with a velvet cloak. Badrang sat, gazing at the work going on around him. The stoat lord addressed Hisk. "Will my fortress be finished before summer is out?" Hisk waved his coiled whip about at the slaves.
Lord, if the weather is cooler and we had more creatures...
Badrang moved swiftly in his anger. Seizing a pebble, he hurled it, striking Hisk on the jaw. The weasel captain stood dumbly, blood trickling from his lip, as the tyrant berated him.
Excuses. I don't want to hear complaints or excuses, do you hear me? What I need is a fortress built before autumn. Well, don't stand there sniveling. Get on with it.
Immediately, Hisk got to work, flaying about with the whip, as he passed on his master's bad mood.
Move, you useless lumps. You heard Lord Badrang. Marshank must be ready before the season's out. It'll be double the work and half the rations from now on. Now move!
An old squirrel was staggering by, bent double under the burden of a large rock. Hisk lashed out at him. The whip curled around the aged creature's footpaws, tripping him as he dropped the rock. The weasel began laying into his victim, striking indiscriminately at the old one's frail body.
You worthless layabout, I'll strip this miserable hide off you.
The lash rose and fell as Hisk flogged away at the unprotected creature on the ground.
I'll teach you a lesson you won't soon forget.
Suddenly, the whip stopped in mid-swing. It went taut as Hisk pulled on the handle. He tugged at it, but was yanked backwards. The young mouse had the end of the whip coiled around his paw. Hisk's eyes bulged with temper as he shouted at the intruder.
Let go of my whip, you mouse, or I'll get you.
The weasel reached for the dagger at his waist, but he was not fast enough. The mouse hurled himself upon Hisk. Wrapping the whiplash around the captain's neck, he heaved hard. Hisk thrashed furiously in the dust, choking and slobbering as the lash tightened. Gurrid blew a hasty alarm on a bone whistle he carried slung around his neck. In a trice the mouse was set upon by the nearest 6 guards. He disappeared beneath a jumble of ferrets, weasels, and rats as they pounded him mercilessly, stamping on his paws and breaking his hold on the whip. They continued relentlessly beating him with spear handles, rods, and whips, until Badrang intervened.
That's enough. Bring him to me.
His paws pinioned by whips and a spear handle pulled hard across his throat. The young mouse was dragged struggling and kicking into the stout lord's presence. Badrang drew his sword and pressed the point against the young one's heaving chest. Leaning forward, he hissed into his captive's face.
You know the penalty is death for attacking one of my horde. I could run you through with my sword right now and snuff out your life. What do you say to that, mouse?
The strong young mouse's eyes burned into the tyrant's face like twin flames as he gritted out, Scum! That sword is not yours. It belongs to me, as it belonged to my father. Badrang withdrew the sword point. He sat back, shaking his head slowly in amazement at the boldness of the creature in front of him.
Well, well, you're not short of nerve, mouse. What's your name?
The answer was loud and fearless. I am called Martin, son of Luke the warrior. See the roving river run, over hill and dale, to a secret forest place, O my heart, Noonvale. Look for me at dawning, when the sun's reborn, in the silent beauty, twixt the night and morn. Wait till the lark ascends, and skies are blue. There where the rainbow ends, I will meet you. The mousemaid rose, sat quite still, as the last tremulous notes of her song hovered on the evening air. From a vantage point in the rocks south of Marshank, she looked out to sea. The water was tinted gold and scarlet from soft cloud layers reflecting the far westering sun at her back. Below, on the shore, an ebbing tide gurgled and chuckled small secrets to itself as it lapped the pebbles.
Miss Roser, you comin' and get this your supper? I bain't a cookin' victuals to lay about and git cold and soggy, no.
Rose's companion, Grum, waved a heavy digging paw at her, and the mousemaid wandered over to join her mole friend at the low fire he had been cooking on. She sniffed appreciatively. Wild oatcakes and vegetable soup. Good old Grum, you could make a banquet from nothing. Grum smiled, his dark velvety face crinkling around two bright button eyes. He waved the tiny ladle which he always carried thrust through his belt like a sword.
And you could charm me birds out in her trees with your sweet talkin', missy. Sit ye down and eat oop.
Rose accepted the deep scallop shell full of fragrant soup. Placing her oatcake on a flat rock across the fire to keep it warm, she shook her head as she sipped away. You're worse than an old mousewife, Grum Trencher. I wager you'd rock me to sleep if I let you. Grum wagged the small ladle at her.
Hurrah, you needin' all your sleep. Imagine what your old dad say if I brought you home tired out and starved to death. Hooar!
The mousemaid took a hasty bite of oatcake, fanning her mouth. Ooh, it's hot. There'll be no sleep for us until we found out whether or not Brome is held captive in that dreadful fortress. Grum wiped his ladle clean with some sedge-grass.
Mayhap old Brome just wandered off and gotten lost. Maybe he bain't captured in yon fortress.
Rose shook her head. You must understand, Grum, the name Brome and the word trouble go together. He was always in trouble with father at home. That's why he went off wandering. You weren't there at the time, but they had a furious argument over Brome just taking off and roaming as he pleased. Father said it was no way for the son of a chieftain to learn his responsibilities, but Brome wouldn't listen, and he ran off alone. Well, we've tracked him this far, Grum, and I'm sure that my brother has run straight into trouble again. That's why I'm sure he's been taken by Badrank's scouts. I hope that he hasn't been forced to tell them where Noonvale is. The whole tribe of Uranvor would be in danger if Brome gave away our location to that filthy tyrant. Grum refilled Rose's shell with vegetable soup.
Don't ye fret, missy. Old Brome can keep his mouth shut tighter than a muscle at low tide, however.
The mousemaid unwound the throwing sling from about her waist. I hope you're right, Grum. I'd hate to think of the things those vermin would do to a young mouse to get information. The mole patted Rose's back gently with a heavy digging claw.
Don't you worry, Roser. Us'll get old Maester Brome out in yon pastole, if him be in there.
When they had finished eating, they extinguished the fire and broke camp. A stiff breeze had sprung out of the east, bringing with it a light spatter of raindrops, which threatened to get heavier as night set in. Scrambling down the rocks, the two friends gained the shore, their paws making soft, chinking noises as they trotted through the shingled tide line. Marshank stood grim and forbidding up ahead, a dark hump of misery in the moonless night. And that, my friends, is Chapter 1 of Martin the Warrior, A Tale of Redwall by Brian Jakes. I'd just like to remind everyone that these books are still widely available in most bookstores, and of course used bookstores as well. So if you enjoy what you're hearing here, I really encourage you to go check them out. There's an extensive series of more than 20 of them, and they're really excellent, especially for younger folks. And there's also some really well-produced audiobooks available from various websites for download. And they have a whole cast of voice actors that bring these characters to life far better than I ever could. And they're even narrated by the author himself, Brian Jakes. So I'll leave it with that for now. I do hope that you enjoyed this reading, and I look forward to having you back here for Chapter 2. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.